Oui, ça va pas être simple.
Yes, definitely not easy. Here we are at the Cité de l'Architecture, so of course we'll be discussing architecture-related topics. Thank you, Aurélie. Now, concepts sometimes do bring about certain monumentalizations with regards to certain ideas, but other times complete disappearances, which is quite interesting. We've spoken about the Roissy airport, and we also have the Polandreux exhibition in this house, and obviously Roissy 1 is a concept in itself, which was a criticism of the US system, a complete different take on things. So much for planes. If we are to focus on ships, I could definitely say a few words about this. You know, for ships, we all remember the Colas project, which was a bit of an iconic project, which never came to life, but nonetheless very interesting. And the one that was actually turned into a reality was the Yokohama project, whereby the ferry terminal completely disappeared. 100% of public space therefore created, which was quite amazing to close that morning loop. And if we are to refer to trains, this morning we spoke at great length about Stuttgart, where the train station is actually disappearing, but also Berlin, which is completely theatralizing it with the absolutely amazing shuffling that was brought about. We are far, far from Hector Guimard. As you'll see in the exhibition, he thought of himself as an art architect. Even in his drawings, he had a really specific signature. So he was a designer architect. Port Dauphine, for example, is one of the most beautiful marquees that we have. And we, of course, we've been talking about stations. So with the Grand Paris Express project, what's really interesting is that we do not have just one model that we're copying and pasting, but rather located specific projects. So this is a project that really is fighting against generic architecture, and I think that that is one of its key qualities. You have a scenario that's rolled out on the table for each situation. So with this next roundtable, we have very different profiles, starting with Dominique. With the Grand Paris Express project, if you would like to take that microphone, there might be a presentation you wanted to show to us, 4 slides. So he'll be working on the crossing of 2 lines, lines 14 and 15. Yes, so indeed, here we are in Villejuif, in the south of Paris. This is an in-depth station, around 50 meters underground, in a place that's very important. And indeed, it will help connect the Gustave Roussy Hospital, which is one of the largest oncology centers in Europe. With this train station, the idea is to extend the city towards the subservice. We've spoken a lot about subsurface, about underground networks today, and you really want to create that connection between what's happening underground and over the surface. This station is not monumental in its visible part, but more monumental in its underground section. Natural light will enter that part that's underground, and
on sortira de sa rame de métro et l'on verra au-dessus de
when people will be getting off their metro, right above their heads, they'll see natural light shining through. So the idea again is to extend cities underground. We've spoken about public spaces, and really this is a place which will be for the common good. So the principle is for that train station to start quite far down. With the first two levels, there will be services, stores, and outlets, and the Gustave Roussy Hospital will also be extended underground with a connection to that train station. This is a very interesting train station. We've spoken about infrastructures in various ways and about architecture as well, with
la dimension d'infrastructure et d'ingénierie, on l'a utilisé comme un langage.
House of cards, etc. But
si on peut dire, et dans une relation très directe
here the idea is to have that direct relationship with the work that was imagined by engineering. My proposal back in the day, when we were applying during interviews, was to develop that cylinder shape. This is a 70-meter diameter station that goes 70 meters down, and with that cylinder shape you do not use quite as much material. The wall that's separating the train station from its geophysical environment is just a 1 meter thick wall of concrete. So with its dimensions, the train station will be quite open and will not take up quite so much space. And these will be, and the estimate is that there will be 80,000 passengers going through the station every single day. So this project is an extension of our realization in Napoli with a metro station that was built in front of the train station on the Piazza Garibaldi. And again, the idea was to shed a light underground with mechanisms and systems that we implemented in Villejuif as well, but in a more Cartesian way and in a more scientific way, so to speak. So here you have a movement that's being staged. We're going underground, no galleries, no tunnels. Light is here with us the whole time. When you get off your metro, you have that natural light shining down on you directly. So you have that natural flow that's accompanying passengers. And the space, the vacuum is here from a physical standpoint, allowing the air to also enter fully in these volumes, and the same applies to light. And so there will be no longer any discontinuity between that train station underground and the city above. Okay, so thank you very much. First of all, Yansong, turning to you, thank you so much for being here. You were on the other side of the planet just a few hours ago. and you found it MAD. Now, one can imagine the comments that Aurélie Bélanger could make just on the basis of the very name of your agency. But joking aside, you were trained by Zadid, quite remarkable indeed, and that exacerbation of movement in architecture is something that has been a true feature of your work. And with the towers that you built in Toronto, amongst many other very important projects, you know, very large train station in China, well, in Europe, here you are in Milan working on a gateway that you will talk to us about, I believe. What does it mean when you are building the very gate to Milan? Here again, we're going back to these mythical concepts. Over to you.
From China, so actually I'm going to show several station projects we work on in China. And my title is, I think we like nature, and we like to combine nature and the public space together with train stations. So this is my title. And in quite a small city called Jiaxing, we built one train station like here. But mainly in this picture, you see this all belongs to a train station. There's a
small city in China.
It's a small one. This one is a small, and you see some commercial buildings, some dish-like buildings. There are commercial buildings, some office building, hotel, but you see more green, because we on the right-hand side. There was an existing park. We opened the gate for that park, and we let the green grow into the train station. So the idea is to let all the traffic go underground, and many functions go underground to leave more space above the ground for a green space. That way, you can attract a lot of public come here, not only travelers, but also everyone. So the train station can be for daily use. And we kept one historical building, only 2 floors. So that became the excuse. We can make the new train station really low. So we kept the 2-story building. On 2 sides, you see the new building with only 1 floor above ground, and the main function we push to the below. So we also bring the natural light go to the underground. We let the public transportation, the parking, everything go underground. So we can keep the ground space open for trees. So that's the space underground with a lot of natural light. You can see the historical building. Also, there's a waiting area here. So above ground, we introduce a lot of like commercial, like public functions, but we integrate all this function with the park. So the idea is the train station is very functional, but a lot of people come here, but they should go beyond the function. They should provide more space, like a green space, public space, open space. So that was the idea. So this is another train station, but it belongs to a new train station developed area. It's a city called Quzhou. We're supposed to build several stadiums next to the train station. But here you can see we covered all these train stations, all these stadiums with a green. So the whole area become a park. So all this mountain-like structure inside, there are stadiums. They look like volcanoes, you know. It's a big space inside, but outside you can walk around as a park. You can climb those structures. You know, those are artificial mountains. You can just go up there. And this is one stadium we already completed. We're building more, but this one is already finished. Is an open, space for sports, but. Around it is a public park, but this is next to a train station. So we decide to, provide not only the sports function, but also a green park. So here you can see that they're building the train station first, and then they're building all these cities around because the transportation can bring a lot of people, and they build a residential, commercial around the train station. But here, the stadium become the starting point for this new open green space. Here's another case. Nanjing is a more bigger city. So you see that station, they already built a really big station, really boring architecture, but it's a big station. But a lot of towers, they're already building around the station. We built these towers, the white towers. We couldn't build a park here, but we tried to transform the architecture into something more natural. So here you see this ground area is more become village and trees and courtyards. So we can attract people come into the space, to enjoy more nature and the human scale. And we treat the towers more like a waterfalls or something, more like a natural inspiration next to a very functional building. The last project is underway. We're still designing this, but this is actually in front of a huge train station in Shenzhen. You see that the background is a big station. It's connect to Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and the rest of China. In front of this, there's a space. They want to build more functions, but they didn't exactly know what to do. But here is our proposal to keep the ground more like integrated natural function. And then we build this big arch as a space museum. Underneath is a lot of educational function for kids, Actually, they have many towers around. Every station, they have towers for office, residential, hotel. But what is lacking here is for people to stay and for kids, for families to go there, because they don't go there. They only go business. So we will figure out to providing more public space, leisure space, parks, educational space. So here is one of those kind of space. There's a museum above ground in the sky, and you can go up from the angled lift. And underneath is a green space. Under the green space is the subways, train tracks, everything. And that's why the structure has to go to all the corners, because you cannot build anything in the middle. So we make this almost like a gateway in front of the existing train station. Of course, they need a landmark. They need something visual, but more important, they want to, they need something more engaging, more usable as a public attraction. So underneath here, you have a park, you have an educational function. Above there, you can always providing like a view deck for everyone to go up. So that's I think I hear the previous conversation. I really support. I think the functional architecture should be also something beauty and the cultural related, and that's everyone can enjoy all this journey as a part of the life. Thank you.
Merci. On va revenir à cette idée évidemment.
Thank you so much. Of course, we'll go back to all of these ideas later on. Turning to you, Dietmar Feichtinger, you're very well known here in Paris, since, of course, your legacy is quite major with these absolutely wonderful works above the Seine, with the Simone de Beauvoir bridge that connects the Bibliothèque to the Cinémathèque. So we've spoken at great length about public space since the start of our conference this morning, and I believe that this is really a strong connection. We're speaking about mobility as a source of urban planning. So Dietmar Feichtinger has developed a very interesting project in Ostend. This is a place a seaside town that's very contemporary, with all of the key features of your contemporary towns. And also you build air train stations, so you're part of that 10%. Over to you, sir. Yes, so I'm starting with a very different station here in Versailles Chantier. So quite a contrast. Indeed. This is a very contrasting development. Here we have an existing station with the Versailles Chantier station that already existed, and it was extended with the Grand Paris project, with the metro extension. We're speaking about infrastructure and architecture in that roundtable, and about the connections between both. Well, you know, these train stations that are underground, that are kind of station boxes, quite inevitable in a way. You know, it's a constraint that you have to make do with, kind of like a machine. And then when you get out, go back to the surface, and as Dominique said, with the cylinders, you know, when it comes to orientation and directions, these are key questions. And in Versailles, we wanted to indeed keep that old train station, but, you know, add a little something else to it. This is a project in Guyancourt, and you said, you know, one should not necessarily speak about a station, but even if you are in Guyancourt, of course here you're going to create a station. When it comes to public spaces, you know, here we're basing ourselves on public space. You have that grand square here, and it's on an intermediate level with the mezzanine, and you have natural light shining through within the station, and you have an underground passage connecting both sides. Connections are important, and this is a topic which I think is perhaps rather conventional. You've already spoken about the Villepinte station, so I think I'm going to perhaps not focus too much on it. We are in charge of an entire section there. That's 5 kilometers long, above ground. And as I listened to Aurélie, I thought to myself, well, that's a pity, because there should be indeed more metro lines on the surface. We were so lucky to be able to tell the story of the landscape that we are going through. So it's kind of like a stroll through these existing urban spaces, or urban spaces to be, kind of like a promenade. You spoke about the Simone de Beauvoir passageway, and here we have a really great example of that, with a connection that was made between the city center areas and other surrounding areas. And with these connections, well, you know, things can work. Here, that's the access passageway to the Mont Saint-Michel. Why did I want to speak about this project? Well, that's because here you have that intimate connection between the structure and architecture. And what you're seeing here, well, we planted these poles every 12 meters, which was definitely no easy enterprise with the tides that come and go every 12 hours. We worked hand in hand with engineering, and with surface metros, that's certainly something that you need to do as well. You really need that connection between engineering and architecture. You really want to work hand in hand. It's really important. Now, very quickly, this is our journey. although it could be longer. So here you're going above ground. We also go through the A1 and A3 highway, and further up, we're going through areas which do not quite exist just yet, all the way down to Tremblay. And so here you have the entire journey. What did we want to do? Well, with our project, with that viaduct, we wanted to insert ourselves with these pillars and poles, but in a very delicate way. We really wanted to be that. We really wanted to connect the dots here, just so that passengers can enjoy the views and the landscapes. For the train station, we didn't have much to do. I mean, it's just about, perhaps further sizing up the train station, and then we have that delicate connection with the viaduct that we designed and developed. And then you go on to disappear into the tunnels underground. This is a train station with many connections, which is also connected to the Parc des Expositions in Villepinte. So you have people going there to attend exhibitions, and then on other days there are no exhibitions at all. These are territories that are under development, really. And with that train station, we opted for a steel structure. Why? Well, that's because that kind of structure allows us to further draw those various elements, to give a different scale, to give a different understanding. You have these A-shaped, V-shaped pillars and poles supporting the structure. Now, this is a picture that was taken very recently near Venice, and this is where we're building the first supporting elements. All right, so that's great. Thank you so much for your presentation. Now, turning to you, Aurélie Hsiao. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. You work for the UNStudio, which is an international landmark with the Erasmus Bridge in Rotterdam, for example, which really injected renewed momentum in that area. And the city of Rotterdam is perhaps one of the most incredible European urban labs, one of the most dynamic. And in the Netherlands, of course, in the Randstad, you have Arnhem. And Arnhem is a project that we've all looked at and perused because we felt that actually UNStudio was really inspired by Idlewild and Saarinen. In New York, we have that image in our minds, and it was kind of a metaphor in the movement, and that gesture really accompanies the idea. And then the metro in Doha, I'm not going to go through that entire list, but just the UNStudio seems to be very much concerned by the question of mobility.
I mean, the question that we ask ourselves is actually quite simply, why a train station? Why a train network? And how can that have a positive impact on the health and well-being of people? And that is our fundamental question. And the first thing we try and focus on is making sure people feel safe. We know that is a very important aspect for people when we are designing the shape of a train station. And here we have this fundamental structure, which is a mushroom-like structure, and it can have a span of up to 35 meters on either side. Now, why did we think of a mushroom? Well, it's a way of having an open view on all sides. So you can actually feel safe as you're walking through this train station. There's no corridor, there's no dark corner where you aren't visible. Well, no matter where you are, you can see right through to the platforms within the train station. And on top of that, it, in addition to the feeling of safety, provides open access. You can also see that the floor has no stairs on it, so it's nice and easily accessible for all. And then we take that initial question and we take it a next step further. How can we take that impact from just an individual train station and apply it to an entire train network? So with this example, we had the additional challenge of designing and building 37 train stations along 3 different lines in just 7 years. 7 years. So the first thing we had to do was come up with a design that was highly modular. So modular in the sense that we actually came up with a design handbook, and in that design handbook it covers all of the principles and all of the different parts that could easily be put in by any architects who would be working on the project down the line. We'll be working on the 37 different stations. And it also created a sense of consistency between all of them, but it could be adapted to each individual context. And also ensuring that we could keep it at a manageable scale, because we wanted to create spaces with public spaces that would change habits and the way people engage with these different sites. Because unfortunately, nearly all people in the area didn't really engage with the underground system. A lot of people drove cars, so we had to change habits in that sense. This is another interesting project in Madrid that we're currently working on. And for this, we wanted to carry forward that same idea of well-being and safety. We wanted to focus on physical health, but also one's mental health, because we are starting to really become aware of how important that is, but also social health. And we had to, with this project, transform the pre-existing site, which is what you have on the left of the screen, where there were issues of safety. It was quite an abandoned site and quite dangerous to be there, and we had to transform it into an area that was quite appealing, quite open, something where again, all 4 sides were open, where you could have inflows and outflows throughout the entire building. And again, the fundamental idea to have as many people coming in and out of the building as possible. And we all really wanted to celebrate the beauty of that historical site, because the site was in fact beautiful, or we wanted to at least try and highlight those parts that were beautiful in the existing site. So we took those arched ceilings and highlighted them. We really wanted to find ways of creating high ceiling spaces as well, because with those high ceiling spaces you can get in more light, and natural light is a fundamental way of making people feel safe, feel good. Again, well-being being such a fundamental part of the design, of having open views. And it was a way of encouraging people to come into the space and use public transport. Once again, there was some of the building that we kept entirely, other areas where we refurbished them, other areas which were entirely new constructions. But again, in each of those 3 main areas, we tried to keep a sense of consistency across the design, to build upon the pre-existing buildings. Again, here we can see this feeling of movement, but also we created spaces of relaxation where people would want to not just travel through, but also want to stay there to enjoy the space. And as I said, we wanted to keep things at a human scale, at a livable scale. Because one thing which is quite extraordinary is that the postcode, where we live, our postcode, it has more of an impact on our sense of health and well-being than our own DNA. I think it's a fascinating notion just to think of. So what that means, for every station that we are building, we have an opportunity to really transform the quality of life of those local residents, to have a positive impact on their sense of health and well-being. And oftentimes these train stations are in those areas which are forgotten areas or ignored areas of cities. So creating these beautiful spaces is a way of creating a new sense of dynamic, and it's a way of us playing a greater purpose. Something I also want to talk about because it really pulls together all of the examples I've just spoken of. It's a project that we've been working on, the Austin Transit project. It really takes this notion of transit-oriented development, TOD, which is a fantastic principle. It's got plenty of merit behind it, but we want to take that and elevate it. We want to take that concept and take it to people-oriented development, where we're focusing not just on transit, but the people who use transit systems. So what that means is that we use techniques that are often found in cognitive science and behavioral science to understand, study, and analyze and evaluate the way people use space, what they feel, what sort of stress they feel. And we want to try and understand why they feel that. Do they feel fear? If so, why? Who uses which spaces as opposed to others? Are there types of people? I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but it's a very interesting way of trying to understand the way people experience these spaces, to learn from them, and then to try and leverage that as we design future spaces. We also use really high-tech systems here to analyze all of that. And with that, we can really follow. I mean, we're not following, but we're monitoring exactly what people see when they enter a specific space. So what do they look at? What do they feel? Because we measure their stress or level of relaxation. And that feeds into this, where we can come up with design spaces that are sustainable cities, sustainable neighborhoods, or it could be the area around a train station, which is designed around people. And it is really spaces that are for all. Thanks very much. I'd like to hand over to Nathalie Roseau. So, Nathalie, earlier on I spoke of Pôle Andreu, and I did it by design because there is currently an exhibition on Pôle Andreu. But you yourself, you were in charge of a project, the 2F project. Focusing on Pôle Andreu's designs, but you're also part of a program on transformation. So here we come back to this notion of myths. You did exhibitions on the myth and the man. So a professor of urban planning at École ParisTech, you direct research programs on this. You're also an architect and engineer, a PhD graduate in design. So you don't really build projects, but you monitor them, you look at them, you analyze them, you study them. So what is your view? Let's hear from you. Well, thanks. Now, I don't have any pictures to show, but I have a few comments here that I would like to share with everyone. Well, I'd like to thank you for inviting me here. And even here at the Cité, now at the Cité de l'Architecture and Patrimoine, there are two exhibitions on architecture, on infrastructure and architecture, and the interplay between the two. And it's quite, and here we're talking about infrastructure which is quite unique because of their scale, the funding that goes to them, also because of how complex they are, because they have to fit into very changing environments. And here I'm not just talking about the physical environment, but also the political and economic environment. And these are projects that spread out over large geographic areas, but also spread out over time because they're quite expansive projects. So the Grand Paris is such a major project. Again, people speak of the mythological figure of Haussmann, and some could talk of Nicolas Sarkozy, who will be here this afternoon, as being another mythological figure. But it's quite interesting because right back in the end of the 80s, the Michel Rocard government wanted to create a new guiding principles for the Greater Paris area called Orbiter, and it laid down a few key principles, and there was a lot of consultation back in the time, very exciting consultation. There was a certain convergence of interests there, and then the Grand Paris Express came out of that long process. But the Grand Paris Express is very future-looking, but the future is very changing. So there's this notion of infrastructure as an architectural form, which is quite exciting. So here we're talking about train stations. As you saw, all the train stations are very different. The actual infrastructure, the service is going to be very complex. They have to be dug deep down in the earth, where we're going to have large numbers of people going through them. But then also the infrastructure, the networks in and of themselves are an infrastructure that people are going to have to use and walk through. And that also creates a new layer to the Grand Paris Express. So there is this notion of time that we could think about, and when we think of time, this actually ties back to some of the previous conversations we've had, where we think about the original intent behind the Grand Paris Express. Can we actually measure the impact of this overall project? So we spoke earlier of the 2005 riots, spoke of 2023, and we can speak of the changes it's going to bring. Then I don't see how this project specifically tackles the issues of those 2005 riots, but certainly it is putting Paris on the international map as being a major metropolis. But it is positive, but are those positive aspects covering up some of the more negative aspects of it? Actually, during the consultation process, as Jamel just said, it was quite an amazing time, especially when looking at the different forms of representation we saw. So we had different representatives of people from within the greater metropolitan area, because everyone was trying to find a way to truly represent the greater metropolitan area as being a unified whole. But a unified whole which was still quite heterogeneous. So we still wanted to find a sense of unity through difference. But what we saw is that while we strived for more unity, we saw more difference coming through. And I mean, we can see that just in the architecture of each individual train station. And then also within the Greater Paris Ring, there are multiple communities, very different communities. And there are going to be more communities that are going to be building up around these train stations. So it was very interesting to try and see how people represented this image of what Greater Paris meant. And also through this consultation process, while there were urban planners and architects trying to push the discussion, there were many other topics that came through. They had to touch on topics that they weren't really used to touching on usually. And then, while there was the exhibition that was being held on the Grand Paris program, there was it was an exhibition on movement, on transport and moving around. I think Jean-Marie was the curator for the exhibition. And one of the things that came out of the consultation process about the Grand Paris was that either it was about providing additional transport, or it was catching up for lost time in terms of provision of transport services. Again, here we're talking about access to public transport, that a lot of people felt, either rightly or wrongly, that they had fallen behind. And here, a lot of the initial Paris metro system was actually first devised in 1913, which was neither Haussmann, neither now. So, building along those original plans, there are a number of communities that were actually left out, so we had to catch up for a lot of that lost time in a very short amount of time. There were other negative effects. There was gentrification, evictions. There are still 5 million people who actually live in the Greater Paris area. Now, while Massy is going to shift from the Greater Paris area into the inner suburbs, I mean, that is a change of scale, but there is still this notion of infrastructure as an architecture which goes beyond the stations, which goes beyond the actual railways. There's this whole question of how this Greater Paris Express ties in with the rest of the local transport networks that are already existing. So you have the RER and the metro that all exist, but on top of that you have hybrid systems, such as buses. And it was all of that which was a bit more abstract, which had to be thought of. And the final point that I just want to touch upon was this notion of public architecture. Metro is something that is funded by public authorities. Money comes from public funding. And now, while Cité de Grand Paris, it is a private organization that is actually funded by public funding. So the actual metro infrastructure is something which gives a public face to public action. And it is... And this actually ties back to a number of questions that I would have loved to have asked all the architects who design and then build these buildings. Now, Dominique, if you just want to grab the microphone here, I'm going to ask you a question now. So in a previous roundtable when talking about public space, we were talking about the fact that a lot of people were thinking about European cities, but when we look over to Asia and China in particular, it's a very different world. Now, again, we're not talking about just different scales, it's a different mindset. So you work quite a bit in Asia when talking about transport-related topics, such as in Seoul, with those large 800-meter glass poles that seem to dig down right into the soil. I don't know how many meters. So when thinking about that and comparing it to the projects at Villejuif, now again, it's not the same scale. How is it as a European operating in China, in Asian cities? I could have asked my Yansong the same thing. Working in Milan, how does that cross-cultural aspect come to play? Well, the site that we're working on in Seoul is in the Gundam, which is a very... From Gundam Style. Yes, it is where Gundam Style comes from. So I see that you know your K-pop, good to see. But it's a space in downtown Seoul which is highly typical of all downtown areas that we see around the world. It's a space where there is no real way for that space to, in and of its own accord, regenerate itself and change itself. So you have, for example, major roads with 14 lanes going through them, so it's a huge infrastructure coming through that. So we had to find ways of creating links between the different parts of that urban environment that were really cut off from each other. And it was almost as if they'd been disembodied. And we had to create a new space where we could pull them all back together and create a new body, so turning this into a huge hub. I mean, a hub is very much the word we could use. There are two other similar projects in the world. There's one in San Francisco, which is above ground, creating links between cars, bridges, trains, buses and the like. And there's another one in Shenzhen, where there's this same notion of interoperable mobility, again on a very large scale. So in Seoul, it's quite an interesting case. because it's about working with a very much built environment, which is going through considerable constant development. I mean, all around the neighborhood there is constant development going on. So it's about working within that environment. And it's almost something where we had to work with almost surgical precision. So we have a metro station that brings together 3 stations with a private train line, with public transport lines. You also have a bus station as well, pulling it all together in this one massive hub or an ensemble. So this was a $2 billion project, so it's a vast project, again funded by the City Hall and by the South Korean government. So it is a public project. And the aim was not to develop just another shopping mall across 800 meters long with that glass column. It is just a vast gallery, or it's a vast space where people can go from point A to point B. And earlier on, when we're talking about these major projects, something came to mind, and it's that the Grand Paris Express project is a major project, but it is really just the beginning of what is yet to come. For me, the real major project at play here is still yet to come. We are still in the early days. We're still thinking of this as a network. But ultimately, it's just a single line that goes around. It's not really a network. So these stations that are going to be built, they have their own unique architecture, they have their own unique setup. But they are still standalone. These stations, and I really think of those stations that are underground, these stations are really struggling to actually develop beyond the confines of the individual station. And the thing is, these stations, they need to be properly connected to the superstructure where you can create more public space. And I think that's where it's going to be interesting. And I think the major project is the one that is yet to come, is where we will truly create a network, not just a network of mobilities, but an interconnectedness and network of different ways to use the city, of different functionalities that we can find within the city. And that, for me, is the major project that we could envisage. And that is the sort of major project which will be resilient and will have a sense of longevity. You know, maybe we're being a bit utopian when we're thinking about this, but we know that wars are possible. We know that epidemics can always happen. We know that natural disasters can always happen and can always affect us. So having cities that operate in the underground as an organic, very living network, that is a resilient city. And it's not a joke. And it's not a myth like some people are talking about. It is of vital importance. So the current populations today, 12 million people in the Greater Paris region, soon to be 15, 20, surely in the near future, people are going to continue to move into these urban environments. And simply because the urban environments that we're building will or should provide that sense of hospitality or should be welcoming. And again, in these urban spaces, bit by bit, we are going to see these stations going beyond just the station space. And in Seoul, we have that large gallery, that large arcade, where people are going to be able to go through. They're going to be more than just basic services. They're going to be satellite offices from the universities, and we're going to be breaking down walls, sometimes literally breaking down walls, to expand the shopping mall and create spaces where it's not just the shopping mall, but there's conference areas, there's office spaces, there's housing, really creating multi-use spaces. And for me, it's really about breaking down walls.
We see that hub is not a vain word. I saw Nathalie react. Is it frightening? No, not at all. I don't know the project. I know the university that Dominique Perrault designed, the École University. I'm sure there are also male students, but there are many. It's focused on female students. But well, Seoul, I think your project is very interesting, and especially what you're saying about is it the beginning, is it the end, and usually a confusion between the means and the purpose. A metro line has no purpose in se, it's not the purpose of the Great Paris Project. And Seoul is a very interesting city because we all have in mind reopening the canal after dismantling a section of the motorway. But this comes after a whole transformation project regarding mass transport with buses, buses with different speeds on a metropolitan area of 10 million inhabitants. So the metro will allow for more accessibility, but it's not enough for 10 million inhabitants. So what happens next regarding infrastructure, architecture of different nature? How is this object owned by public authorities, owned by transport authorities, to make sure that we bring a level of service? That's when we talk about architecture and infrastructure. It's a bit biased. We're talking about service, about access for everyone in an equitable way. And that's still a pending question that can be concealed by the wow effect of the great architectural project. My Yansong, I'll go back to my question. How do you, coming from China, how do you work on this project in Milan? This morning we talked about another project in Milan with Loma, with Oma and Philippe Ram, and about transforming old railway station and old railways into new park, a new town, a new eco-friendly town, of course, where well-being is important and is on the agenda. So tell us how your Milan project, how did you embrace that?
Difficult project to work with. A lot of limitations compared to doing something in China, and involve a lot of discussion and very long period of design process. We start from very beginning, like doing very conceptual studies for a long time. So it's taking longer time. I feel that's the thing in Europe, but it's more diverse because you involve more discussion, because in each case there are different issues, different urban issues, social issues. But by here, when you want to do things, many things together fast, you have to make a standard. You have to make a more repeat. That's what's happening in China. As in China, we need to build things very fast. Many like 1,000 stations, like following the train tracks. They're building many. So there's one department handling all this, all through China. So it doesn't matter what is city in south, north, smaller town or whatever. They have a very standard typology along this line. So sometimes that make all the train stations disconnect from the city, which is bad. But if you want to do things faster, that's the way. Or that's the only way you can do it. They have to copy all this station. And also the urban typology, urban situation around the station. That's one thing. The other thing is when you do things so quick, there's no system like Dominique just mentioned. The train station the train station, the airport, the subway, they're not connected. Everything on their own. They're different departments, and there's no time for discussion. If you have a longer time, maybe they can work together. But that make really suffer for all the travelers. In the end, the system didn't really work. That's why we built so many beautiful airport, large airport, and in the end, some people choose train because the transport to the airport is too difficult, too painful. So the system designed for human is, maybe it needs more time or discussion. I don't know. But in Milan, it's called the Hub for Creative. But I found in the end that the budget is a big issue. In Europe, sometimes the project, there's a discussion about the beauty and the function. Sometimes it's because of the lacking of money. Because why don't you have a both if you have money? So I find that's something we are facing, the challenge.
On entend bien qu'il faut avoir les moyens de ces ambitions.
Yes, of course, we should have the resources to make your ambitions concrete. We have an impression that the concept, there's always been very strong concept, but in your situation, you focused a lot on health, about care. It sort of transformed the idea, the mindset behind projects and your concerns. Could you tell us more about that? Yes, absolutely. Well, it's not new, to be honest, because our founding member, Ben van Berkel, the first time, or one of the first times that it started talking about health and well-being was already a few years ago, way before COVID. So, of course, when COVID struck, in a way, it gave a new platform, a new impetus. And this topic became even more relevant to everything we do. But from the beginning, if I look at all the books written by people in our studio, let me remember even Move. Move was published a long time ago. It was about moving physically, and this concept has evolved. It's not new, it's just it has evolved with time. We started talking about the physical aspect, physical health, physical well-being, and now we have incorporated the aspect of social health, mental health, so connection with others. This morning we were talking about the Mercedes Museum because we were talking about Stuttgart, and I was making a connection between Stuttgart and the cars, and the conceptual architecture is movement. Yes, that's what you do at your studio. It's move. Yes, absolutely movement. We elevate the concept. We don't add this. I think it's in the same vein. It's really that idea of movement. Everything is always evolving. Nothing remains as such. Nothing is set in stone, and we always need to adapt. Architecture should adapt with the changes. So it's not about adding a concept. It's about elevating. Dietmar, regarding this aerial line, you didn't mention Ostend, but that's not a problem. There's just in passing, because it's a great example of intermodality. Everything's there, cars, trains, the bus, bikes, everything in the same space. It's a concentrate. And that's why you should have a look at Ostend train station. But to go back to the concept of a station, it's not a replication of the station. Every time the station evolves, what are the concepts that lie behind the evolution? Is it depending on the context? How was this thought through in your studio? Yes, I think this question is important. Sites are complex, and when we hear our colleague here, if there is no budget limitation, things are more simple. Yes, but maybe it's not more fair. So maybe European cities have this advantage that they can be challenged, and discussions are long, and there can be even longer. Given the experience that we've had, I come from Austria, and there are a lot of organizations that put obstacles in the way of projects, but maybe sometimes that's good because it rebalances things. And it's not about showing off, it's about being fair, and that's what we're looking for. And in this line that crosses the territories, it's what we're interested in. I didn't particularly want to focus on Ostend Station because it's a line. It's a station, and we're talking about station. Why station? Because well, it's not about showcasing, about being exuberant. It's about natural light. It's about having access there. It's about gathering. Stations, they have a lot of assets with them. A lot of people go through stations on a daily basis. So there's some quietness that should be focused on in this kind of project, and that's very necessary. I'd like to go back to the example of Naples. That's a city of Alta Velocità with the Hadid, who will carry out the project, and also the metro that goes with it. And several architects and artists will be associated to the project and work on different aspects of this project. And Casa Garibaldi, there was the Nervi station that was already there. There was already a big project. When you arrive in Naples by train, you arrive in that station. But then there was a public space. There was like a car park, but like nothing. Just like surrounding the Louvre, there was no public space. It was some sort of car park. So how do you reconquer the place? I don't know if you know the Piazza Garibaldi. It's a very large square, like the Concorde Square in Paris. It's very big, very large. Why is it so wide? Because in the 19th century, there was a train station there. So in the 19th century, the square was not that big. The train station was decommissioned and was relocated towards the east, and Nervi built this new train station. So with this relocation, it created a big, wide space, and it's quite hazardous, dangerous, because it became a battleground between the blacks, the yellow, and the Camorra, killing each other. So there are about more than 100 people dying on this square every year in the past. So it was a major concern for the people who wanted to take the train there, but also for the authorities and the municipality. So the city of Napoli decided to launch this subway project. And that was before the Great Paris project, because the idea was to have a ring, a loop between the ferry station to the metro station that Rogers is building, and to the train station that I built. So there was some sort of loop connecting the different modes of transport, the metro being the link between air, ground, and underground. So the idea was to have every station built by an architect and an artist working together. So this idea existed in Napoli before Paris. And the strategy for the construction site was, the idea was to have a peaceful, to create a peaceful space, to put an end to the killings, to the crimes that were perpetrated there. So little by little, progressively, the space has become more peaceful, there is less crime there, and then there's the metro station with a connection towards the historic line in the national train station, Napoli's regional train, the bus terminal. So there are 5 stations that progressively were connected to one another in a quite smooth way, because everything's happening at one level below that of the station. So a big gallery, gallery was created along that square to start a real network, a network that goes beyond the metro line itself. So that was the strategy of the Nepalese authorities. It was very efficient, and the metro looks beautiful.
Bien. Bien. Nous allons donc clore cette
well, we will close this round table.
Je voudrais juste terminer sur quelque chose de
and maybe
la Consultation internationale du Grand Paris, et je salue le président.
And I would like to say hello to the president who inaugurated the Cité de l'architecture here. So today was an event about research. 10 teams of architects, international teams gave their assessment on the post-Kyoto metropolis, and that was a great event. So I would like to end with Victor Hugo, who said, when he wrote Notre-Dame de Paris, great events have great sequels. So we will talk about the future of projects. This is only the beginning. Thank you, everyone, for your great contribution. And yes, here we will continue discussing in the coming month and the coming years. Thank you.